Welcome everyone to our fourth week's lecture. Now, if you're actually going through the lecture videos as well as solving the programming exercise by your own, I believe you are working really hard and you have learned lots of things so far. So, in the last 3 weeks, we have actually covered lots of things. And before actually we start this week's lecture, I want to do a small recap on the things that you have learned. Okay, let's take a look on those things. So we started our lectures with for loop and if else condition. Okay. They are very basic things and they are actually available in every programming languages. Next we learned some other things that is very important, that is called linear index. If you remember linear index, then we learned subscripts. We have also seen logical index, three types of index that is actually available in MATLAB. Okay. To identify the position of an element in an array, things like that. Next, we actually learned different types of data types. Okay. Different types of data types. For example, we started with integer data type. Then we saw character data type, string data type, cell data type. We also saw none data type. Okay. Now, beside those things, there are actually many other data types available in MATLAB. Now, these data types are actually necessary to represent different types of data. Okay. So if you remember, if I want to represent a name, I'll use this character data type or this string data type. Okay. So to represent different types of data, I actually need the help of different data types. Let me give you an example. Say for example, in your first week or second week, we saw this table, and when we are working with this table, I just copied this numeric portion, only this numeric portion as well as the non data, to a matrix. Okay, we did that because our array or matrix can only hold numeric data but not the string data. It cannot hold those things together because that data type is actually homogeneous data type. If you remember, I told you it can be homogeneous, it can also be heterogeneous. Now, since our array or matrix is actually a homogeneous data type, it cannot hold this integer value or numerical value as well as this character value. Okay. To do that, we need to take help of something that is the heterogeneous data type. Okay. And if you remember, cell is a heterogeneous data type, but representing the data using cell is a bit complicated, not very easy to handle. There are much better way to actually represent that data, and that is what is called table data type. Okay. Using this table data type, we can actually very easily use these things. We can actually very easily show these things in a table data. We can include these characters as well as these numbers as well as these non-values within a table. Okay. And when you are working with any real data in a let's say in Excel file data or anything like that, if you want to uh, take those things in MATLAB, import those things in MATLAB, you will see it will be imported as a table. Okay, so it is actually a very common, okay, way to represent data because it can hold both the string data as well as the numeric data. So we'll actually look into the table data type, okay, in this week's lecture, this table data type. And besides that, there are some other data type, like for example, one interesting thing is actually date time data. Say for example, you know your birthday and you know today's date, and you want to calculate how much your age, okay, the exact year, exact month, exact day, how much you have aged. Okay, now to do that numerically, you have to do lots of calculation. You have to calculate the months, you have to consider the leap years and so on. There are a lot of things to consider, and that actually complicates the process. But you can actually do it very easily, okay, very easily with a single line of code using this date time data type. Okay, using this date time data type, you can do it in a one line of code. Okay, but due to the shortage of time, and we are actually going very fast, so due to the shortage of time I will not be able to cover this date time data. So if you want, you can actually have a look into that, and you will see that it is actually very easy to work in those things as well. Okay, there are actually three types: date time, then duration data to calculate, to measure the duration. There is another one that is called calendar duration. These three types of data type actually. So for example, if you want to consider the leap year, okay, you don't have to explicitly tell that. Your MATLAB will take care of those things if you actually use this calendar duration. Okay, and this way, to any kind of date and time, if you want to work with any kind of date and time, this is the best way to do that. Okay, now beside those things there are many other data types, and due to the shortage of time I cannot actually show you everything. So I believe you will still have, with the knowledge of these things, you will have a very basic knowledge to work with MATLAB. Okay. Now later on we also see some other things, like for example, there are three types of variables we also see. Like one is the local variable, then there was global variable, and there was another thing that is called persistent variable, although I couldn't cover that thing, but I believe you have the idea of these two things that is more important. Now after that we actually learn some interesting techniques, and this is actually very important. Okay, for programming this is actually very important. Some of the techniques that we have learned, for example, vectorization. Okay, then we also learned the concept of broadcasting. Okay, then we learned the concept of Boolean masking. Okay, Boolean masking. It is actually the same thing as logical indexing. I believe I actually named it that way. Both are the same thing. Okay, using the true or false, we can actually extract data from an array using this Boolean masking or logical indexing concept. And we also saw the polymorphism feature of MATLAB as well. Okay, now later on we also see something like matrix manipulation technique. Okay, how to matrix manipulation, how to add an how to extract an row, how to extract a column. Okay, how to delete row, how to delete multiple rows at a time, things like that, how to add element to a matrix, how to create different types of matrix, and so on. Many other matrix manipulation techniques. I believe you already have a good idea about those things if you are actually going through the exercise by yourself. Okay, later on we see how to define a function by yourselves, and this is very important concept. Okay, user defined function. Okay, and I believe you have a lots of practice by now, and we'll also see that again in this week. We also covered the Varargin concept, that is the variable input argument. Then we covered the regular expression, that is actually a very interesting feature. If you are working with string data, this is a must. And if you're working, then after midterm, when you will be working with Python, you will see Python's regular expression is actually much more flexible to work with compared to MATLAB. So I believe it will be covered in the next after the midterm. And later on we also see some other things, like for example toolboxes, different toolboxes, although I didn't have time to cover many of the toolboxes. Okay, but I believe you at least have some idea about different types of toolboxes. Okay, then we saw some other techniques like TikTok that can actually help you to compare between different types of codes, how much time, okay, it takes. This is actually important concept that is called the time complexity of your code. Okay, if I have some time, I will actually slightly cover this portion if I get some time, the time complexity of your code. Okay, now later on we actually, I also touched some other concept like visualization. Okay, different types of visualization technique. Sorry. Visualization technique, like I believe we saw pie plot, okay, then bar plot, then histogram plot. Okay, we'll look into some other types of plotting in this week lecture. And last but not the least, we also saw binary image. If you remember, using only 0 and 1, we actually created a chase. And if you solve the programming exercise by now, you have also created like Z, a letter or any letters you can create by only using 0 and 1, by combination of those things. So using those things 0 and 1, that is called actually black and white image, also known as the binary image. And what does actually an image represent? Okay, what does it mean by an image? I believe I will actually try to cover those things in this week a little bit. Okay, so these are the things that I believe have been covered in the last 3 weeks, and we have also learned many of the built-in functions. I'm not going to write those things here, but I believe you already created a notebook by yourself to keep a track of all the built-in functions that you are learning. That's a very good approach. So let's start with this week's lecture, and I hope that you actually enjoy those things and try to have a good understanding on the concept. Okay, practice a little bit. Okay, and it will be fine. Okay, so let's finish.